Ladies and gentlemen, today we're about to go over all the quarterbacks that I think you should be starting and or sitting in fantasy football week 15. This is also going to be week number 1 of your fantasy football playoffs. So hopefully if you made it this far, congrats. And if you are in the bottom half of your league trying to get out of last place, let's get you out of there. Let's see who you can start at quarterback. Maybe stream some of these guys off the waiver wire. Before we hop into this video, please drop a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button. It greatly helps me out. First couple of guys I'm going to mention here are people you need to be starting every single week, no matter the matchup, because they're playing so well right now. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow. They should all be in your lineups, locked and loaded, no matter who they're going against. First matchup that I really want to talk about here is Justin Fields. He is going to be in the start category against the Philadelphia Eagles, and they are actually giving up the least amount of points to quarterbacks this year, so that might scare you off. But Justin Fields is just a freak athlete with his legs. I think he can make up for this greatly. He's still projected about 20 fantasy points on ESPN leagues, and I see it going to about that point, maybe 18 to 20 fantasy points for Justin Fields, which you'll take all day of the week. Now, unfortunately for the Bears, they don't have really that star-studded wide receiver like a lot of other teams in the league do. So if they get down in this game, Justin Fields will be running a lot with his legs. He'll also be spreading the ball out a good amount. I mean, he's got Equanimeous St. Brown, Cole Kmet, Chase Claypool that he's been targeting as of late. If they fall down in this game early and have to climb back in it, I see even more opportunity for Justin Fields to break out in this game. If he breaks out one long run, you get a lot of fantasy points there, and it's definitely worth the risk for that high upside ceiling that Justin Fields provides for you. Next player up on this list that I think you need to be starting in week 15 is Justin Herbert, going up against the Tennessee Titans, who are ranked 31st currently against quarterbacks in the league, which is very bad. Obviously right there, that should give you enough confidence to start Herbert. Another thing that I really like about this matchup is that Tennessee is pretty good on the ground. They're top 10 against running backs in fantasy, so the Eckler should be limited in this matchup, at least on the ground. Through the air, you know Eckler is going to get 8 to 10 targets in this game, so high upside ceiling in PPR leagues for Eckler. Hopefully this game does not, become one of those grindy games where Derrick Henry gets the ball 25-30 times. You know the Titans love to do that. That would be the only scenario where I see Justin Herbert kind of struggling in this game. Other than that, he should have a lot of opportunities, a lot of chances to cash in on touchdowns in this one. Next up on this list might be a little bit of a shocker for some people. They might be like, whoa, you are not telling us to start Trevor Lawrence against the Dallas Cowboys when he was banged up last week. Listen, the Cowboys are ranking 3rd against quarterbacks this year in fantasy, which is very good. But the reason that I'm not worried about Trevor Lawrence in this matchup, first of all, last week he ended with like 33 fantasy points. Definitely better of a matchup than this week, but I've been watching the Jags games all year, and when the Jags fall down, maybe at halftime, they're down by 10, 14 points, Trevor Lawrence will sling the rock in the second half so many times, and he'll get points on the board in those late drives to save his fantasy days. All right, so even if Trevor Lawrence goes into halftime against the Cowboys with 8 to 10 fantasy points, he should still end up around 20, 22 fantasy points in this matchup. That's personally my opinion. So hopefully I'm right, and if you decide to start Trevor Lawrence, hopefully it works out for you. Last but not least, in the start category here is going to be Daniel Jones going up against the Washington Commanders, who are currently ranking 21st, so definitely not the worst matchup in the world for Daniel Jones. The reason that I like Jones in this one is he is very efficient on the ground, and he seems to find the end zone a lot with his legs, which will give you that extra 6 fantasy points if he ends up cashing in. The thing that I don't like about Daniel Jones on a week-to-week basis is that they struggle through the air a lot of the time. I mean, they don't have a real amazing wide receiver similar to the Bears situation that we were talking about earlier, but Justin Fields gets it done with his legs. Obviously, Daniel Jones is not quite the athlete, not even close to the athlete that Justin Fields is, but still, you can expect some fantasy points out of him. Darius Slayton is the #1 here in New York, if you can even call it that right now, so they definitely need an upgrade at wide receiver next season. But as of right now, Still feeling pretty good about this matchup against the Commanders. Should be a close game as well, as it's a divisional matchup, and they also just tied last time they played. All right, now we're going to move on to some players that I think you should actually be benching in week number 1 of your fantasy football playoffs. Starting it off with Tua Tagovailoa going up against the Buffalo Bills, who are currently ranking 6th against opposing quarterbacks in fantasy football. It's not really that stat that scares me. It's last week's performance against the Los Angeles Chargers, which was a great matchup for Tua. 10 for 28, 145 yards and a touchdown is not good at all. All right, I mean, he started out this game, what was it, 3 for 17 or something like that, and to top it all off, in Buffalo on Saturday night, it's supposed to snow. So usually when it's snowing, especially in Buffalo, there's not going to be a lot of passing plays called. I bet you around 20 attempts for Tua, maybe even less in this matchup. So we'll see what happens here. But I'm not feeling too great about it, to be honest with you. Next up on this list of quarterbacks that I would personally sit in week 15, we have Geno Smith going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who are currently ranking 5th against opposing quarterbacks this year. If we take a look back at week 2 against San Francisco, this was his worst performance of the year with 6.08 fantasy points. I expect a low scoring game here this Thursday night between the Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. They have a history of scoring low points. All right, so I wouldn't expect much of a difference here. San Francisco's defense is still very good. Geno Smith, if I have a better option, would be sitting on the bench in my fantasy leagues. Next person up on this list is Dak Prescott going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are currently ranking 25th in the league against quarterbacks. The reason isn't because I think Dak is a bad quarterback. The reason that I think you should sit him in this matchup is I can easily see this one getting out of hand. Like I said with Trevor Lawrence against the Cowboys when I was talking about who to start. On the opposite side of things, I can see the Cowboys going up in this matchup early, leaning heavily on Pollard and Zeke in this one, which they have done in the past couple of games. I mean, it doesn't really matter if the Cowboys are down or up. They seem to just love that running attack, love to give it to their 2 best players other than CeeDee Lamb on this team, and I don't blame him at all. So that's why Dak Prescott's value has been decreasing as of late and why I would sit him on the bench this coming week. Next up on this list, we have Jared Goff going against the New York Jets, who are ranking 8th against quarterbacks currently. And you might be thinking to yourself, Jared Goff, you know, is on the up and up as of late. 17.6 against the Buffalo Bills, 21.6 against the Jaguars, 26.1 against the Minnesota Vikings. These last 2 matchups against the Jags and the Vikings are way better matchups than going into New York and playing the New York Giants, who have to keep games close. Their defense has to do a good job of stopping opposing offenses in order to give this team a chance to win games. I expect this to be not necessarily too low scoring, but I expect it to be a close game. Jared Goff contained a little bit more than the past 3 games, so I personally would be taking him to my bench in week 15 here. Last but not least on this list, we have Derek Carr going against the New England Patriots, who are currently ranking 10th against opposing quarterbacks. This one is much more simple than a lot of them. Josh Jacobs gets so many touches in this offense. I feel like I watched this guy get 10 touches per drive, which is absolutely ridiculous when you got a weapon on this team like Devontae Adams over there. I mean, of course, he catches those long bomb touchdowns, but you got to really rely on that for Derek Carr to get you a lot of fantasy points. Also, Derek Carr is throwing interceptions in every single game that I've watched so far this season. It's really not great, especially over these last couple of weeks when he's been on my bench, on my teams as a viable streaming option. Last week puts up a dud of 2 points. That's absolutely ridiculous, and I'm not taking the risk this week against a much better than previous contest New England Patriots defense. Anyways, guys, if you learned anything from this video or enjoyed it at all, please drop a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button. I will catch you in the next one, and good luck in your week 15 matchup and week number 1 of your fantasy football playoffs. Peace.